Well, welcome to the Building Bliss podcast. Today we've got Caroline Taylor, who is a friend of mine and someone who I came to know through our shared love of construction. Don't know if we'd call it a love.
Well, we will.
Yeah, we'll go for that, shall we? Yeah, she is currently a business development director of an architectural practice. So out and about on the scene around the country, I think. Not
Yeah,
just,
up and about everywhere.
yeah, so I'm very excited to talk to Caroline because she's got a really interesting story and one that really fits into the bliss pillars, which are bravery, laughter, inspiration, spark and success. So I think we're going to have a really eye-opening chat today, hopefully.
Yeah, fingers crossed.
Yeah, so how are you?
I'm good, yeah, thank you
Yeah.
for having me.
That's fine.
Yes,
Good to have you. So, shall we just dive in with the questions
Yeah,
then?
let's
Yeah.
go for it. Yeah.
So, starting with bravery then. Can you pick a moment in your life that stands out as the bravest?
Yeah. Leaving an abusive marriage after being married for 16 years, in a relationship for 20, and then the decision to prosecute what is now my ex-husband. So that's the moment for me.
Yeah. That must have taken an awful lot of bravery.
Yeah, it did, but it had built up over years. The courage to do it had built up over years, and then it was just like a light switch, just flicked, and it was instant. And that was it.
I was going to say, so was there something that happened, or it was literally something inside yourself that just went, enough's enough?
No, he did something that on a particular day. It had been building up all weekend again, and he did something on this particular day, and that was just instant for me. And I knew then I was done, and I would never change my mind. I never have any doubts, and I never did, and I never have since.
And it must have taken a lot of courage then to go on to the next step of actually prosecuting, because a lot of people leave partners that are in a coercive or abusive relationship, but then that's another level of bravery, isn't it, to actually go to that degree. So why did you feel so sort of driven to do that?
Yeah, on average people leave 7 times before they say I'm absolutely done.
Right.
So they always go back.
Yeah.
And it isn't just women, it affects men as well. But for me, the decision to prosecute was because that was my only option at the time. He had boxed me into a corner again, and the only way I could get out of that was to prosecute. So there'd been a period of 4 months from the incident that had happened that made me go, right, I'm done, where we'd still been living together, and that was the October. And then in the February, his behaviour had become erratic again, and something else happened, and I had no choice then. That was the only route I had to get him out of the house, so I could keep it safe for the children, because that was the concern, that it wasn't a safe environment then for the children. And I'd been advised that if I didn't do something, and I would have done it anyway, but if I didn't do something, the children were at risk of being looked at.
Right, so that they could be removed from the home.
Categorically, I'm not putting them and my relationship as a mother at risk to put you first.
Yeah. So
that was it. And the decision to prosecute or to get the police involved again was instant. And I never regretted that either.
No. Well, that's something a lot of people go, oh, why don't you just leave? Just leave. It's, why are you staying there? But it's really not that simple, is it, when you're in that situation?
No. Coercive controlling behaviour is very complex. It isn't always physical, so there isn't always an outward sign that anything's happening. So if you turn up to A&E with a broken jaw or a broken leg and people go, oh my God, he's battered you. But it doesn't have to be physical. It's the drip, 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 little bits over years, and it erodes your confidence, it erodes who you are as a person. So you believe that you can't leave, or you could, but there would be consequences, because there are always consequences of not living in parameters, and you become fearful of those consequences, therefore leaving just it wasn't an option.
No. Well, you're like
Just
trapped
wasn't.
in a prison of your own mind, like not a physical prison, but
Yeah,
I guess it's that making you doubt yourself, sort of gaslighting, I guess,
yeah,
all those kinds of things that
Yeah.
just mean that you've completely stopped trusting your own instincts, I guess.
yeah. But you don't realise that.
Right.
You think
Yeah.
it's okay. You think you're all right. But it's only when you step outside and you look back in, you think, wow, no, that wasn't all right. But when you're in it, you often can't see it, and that is another reason why, I'm not speaking for other people, but from my experience, I think that's the reason why people don't leave, because they don't actually think what is happening is actually that bad. You know, marriage is hard, relationships are hard. They would have you believe that you just want some kind of princess castle with roses round the door.
Mm.
And everybody has bumps in the road. Everybody lives like this to a certain extent, and that isn't the case. But I think to leave, you have to reach your limit, and it's only when you reach that limit that I think you go, right, I've now got the strength to push this through, because it's tough.
Yeah.
Pushing it from A to B is incredibly difficult, and you have to have reached your limit in order to do that.
Yeah.
And that's only somewhere you can get to yourself. Nobody can put you there, no matter what they tell you. Nobody can put you there. You've got to get there yourself, and to get to your limit takes time, which is why it took me, 20 years relationship, 16 years married.
Yeah. So in that 20 years, how long do you think it was like that? Did it start off okay and then deteriorate, or looking back now, can you actually think, oh, actually it was always like that?
We were 6 weeks in when the first violent incident happened. At home, I was living with my mum. She was downstairs,
Mm.
and I remember it, and I still do think, wow, why? You'd only been dating 6 weeks.
I didn't walk away then.
Why didn't you
Mm.
go? Oh my God, what just happened? But I know my reasons now why I didn't, and they do run deep.
I was going to say, that's more, it
They
goes
do,
very
yeah.
deep to who you feel as a person, your
Yeah.
self-worth and
How you were
everything.
brought up,
Yeah.
beliefs, different things, and there are reasons. But now I have daughters. My eldest has a boyfriend. He's a lovely, lovely lad. But I know if she came to me and said, he's just done this, he wouldn't step foot in my house again, and I'd be taken to the police.
Yeah.
But it's mindset has changed though as well. From when I was 21,
Yeah.
perception, understanding, and awareness, and that's one of the reasons why I was happy to speak, because awareness is everything, because it happens behind closed doors and nobody talks about it, and this is why people get away with it.
Yeah. I think, like you say, it's probably a lot more common than people realise.
lot more
In
common.
varying degrees, obviously.
It's a lot more common
Yeah.
than people think.
Yeah. And then obviously that continued throughout then from the start.
Yeah, sporadically.
Yeah.
I'd say the emotional side of it was always there in some shape or form. The parameters of what was acceptable would always be there, and often you wouldn't realise they were there until you'd step out of those parameters and there'd be a consequence,
Right.
and then you'd think, oh, I won't do that again.
So is that in terms of like you going out by yourself, for example, or going to particular places? Was
It
that
could be something as little as going to Tesco when he didn't want me to go to Tesco that day.
right?
No, we're not going to Tesco today.
Right.
Well, you don't need anything today. Not going to Tesco today. We'll stay in the house today.
Right. Wow.
Really,
Really.
what you look back now and go,
Yeah.
what?
It's
The kids would go, we're going to Tesco. No, Dad says we're not going to Tesco today.
Yeah.
What? I'm like, no, we're not going.
So that is just purely about control then, isn't it?
Yeah.
Over another person.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it could be big things, it could be little things, but there were gaps in the middle. I'm not saying the entire marriage was unhappy and it wasn't every day, but they have to give you a reason to stay, because when it's shit, it's really shit.
Yeah.
So if you don't dangle some element of normality, you wouldn't stay.
No, so it's like that carrot and stick, isn't it?
Yes.
I'll be nice for a bit, and then
Yes.
everything's okay, and
Yeah.
then flip.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So they're very aware of what they do, and they're very calculated, and they're very manipulative, very clever.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I think it's like it makes you live in a state of hypervigilance then there
It
as
does.
well. So you're constantly in
Yeah.
fight or flight mode, I
Yeah.
guess.
Yeah, you have a knot here, just under your ribs. Just a knot, a tension, and you have it. And certain things now bring that back. It can be really random stuff, but I can feel it come back, that feeling.
Yeah.
But you get used to living with that feeling. It's just how you are. You
Yeah.
never feel at rest.
No, because you're like, oh, I could just say the wrong thing here, or say something in the wrong way, or look the wrong way.
Yeah.
And then that could have a very
Yeah.
serious consequence.
You're always preempting and planning the next.
Smoothing over.
Yes.
Yeah.
Well, if I did this could happen. Well, I'll plan for this. I'll tell the kids about this, and hopefully that'll be one of the outcomes.
Yeah.
And if it's not, then we'll just have to roll the dice and see what happens.
Yeah. And how was that for your children growing up? Did they have they sensed that tension as they've got older, or
Yeah, and
or
that's
was it
the
just
reason.
normal to them?
Well, no. One of the reasons I left was because the children were noticing. I mean, they were 11 and 15, and they were developing their own relationships. Dipping the toe. Well, the youngest wasn't, but the eldest was.
Yeah.
And I was always scared of her bringing someone home like him, who behaved in the same way. And I would say to him, what if she brought someone home who did X, Y, Z? Well, I'd do this, and I'm like, well, what's the difference? It's not acceptable for her, but it's acceptable for me.
Yeah, so
Never
you
really-
did challenge him.
Yeah,
in the
I did.
moment.
Yeah, I wasn't. I had a voice.
Yeah.
But it was a controlled voice.
Yeah.
You would only say one thing too much, you would get the look. You wouldn't say it again. You'd leave the room.
Yeah.
So there were parameters. Everything had parameters.
Yeah.
In some varying form. He never had an answer to what if she brought someone home like him. But they were looked after. We went on holiday. They had a nice house. They had everything they needed. They never went short. He provided. I'm not saying he didn't, because he did. We both worked. They never went short of anything. But they were exposed to behaviours that they shouldn't have been exposed to.
Yeah.
And they were exposed to circumstance and a way of living that you are planning for certain outcomes just in case.
Yeah.
Don't ask this today because.
Yeah.
We're not going here today because. Or we were going here, but Dad says we're not going now. Well, why? Because. Invariably, there wasn't a real reason.
No.
It was just because Dad said we weren't.
Yeah.
And I wouldn't challenge it.
Yeah.
So when they're exposed to that, that is their norm, and it isn't normal. And I didn't want them growing up thinking this is how life is.
Yeah.
And not knowing how to set boundaries, not being allowed to set boundaries.
Yeah.
That's
Set your
what
own boundaries.
That's what it was.
Yeah.
I wasn't allowed to set boundaries. I lived within his boundaries.
Yeah.
Mm.
So when you did finally, I guess he moved out, did he, once you'd
Well, the police
involved the
removed.
police? Yeah.
Yeah, he wouldn't. He said he would move out, but that was just a game.
Yeah.
And so that's why I had to prosecute. I had to get him out the house.
Yeah. So once he had actually moved out, I guess, how long did it take you to actually come out of that hypervigilance state? Because I guess something like that is, once it's been for so long, you're always going to be in it to some extent. How did you sort of calm yourself in that moment?
Well, I was really happy.
Yeah.
Kind of on a high that I've not felt ever. And I don't think I'll get that high ever again.
Yeah.
There is no feeling like it when you realise that your life's your own.
Yeah.
And oh my God, he's not here.
Yeah. So you could just sit in the peace.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's. I can't explain it. It's unbelievable.
Yeah.
I think it subsides the feeling of being like that, but for me, it's still not really left. It presents itself in other areas of my life. So at work, there's situations where it will come back up, because I was like that for so long.
Yeah, that's what I was thinking, that you get into that state, that's what your body's used to. You're living with cortisol, adrenaline,
Yeah.
and that takes a long time to come down from.
Subside, yeah.
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 And I guess sort of work situations, you can end up being, in a controlling situation, or you feel that someone's stepping on your boundaries. I guess boundaries are very important to you now, asserting your own boundaries.
They are, but I struggle to set boundaries.
Yeah.
People say, oh, well, you're out of it now. You did this, he doesn't live with you, you've got X, Y, Z. But the process really starts now.
Yeah. You're rebuilding from the scratch, really, aren't you?
Yeah.
In a way.
Yeah, you are. And I think whilst I was still on a high from, wow, I've got a new life and look what I can do, and the buzz of not living with him anymore, and not having to communicate with him because there were restraining orders in place. So that was massive for me, that he couldn't communicate with me, because you need the time to heal, but invariably they don't want to give you the time.
No.
They don't want to give you the oxygen or the space, whereas he had no choice because the police decided that he wasn't going to be allowed to speak to me or talk to me, or anything. So that was massive for me. But setting the boundaries for me is difficult.
Yeah. Well, I think I class myself as a recovering people pleaser, and it's the same thing. And it is really hard, because it's that consequence, the thought of the consequence. If I say no to this, what is the consequence? And you end up doing things that, even though they're actually to your detriment, you still say yes, because you're like, well, I better not upset the other person, or they'll think bad of me.
Yeah.
And when you've done that all your life, it's really hard. And the first time you set a boundary and say no, you're like, oh God, I've just set a boundary, what's going to happen? And then actually you go, oh, well, nobody died. They just, if you say, oh, I can't come to that party, and go, okay, that's a shame, see you next time. You're like, oh, right, so I can say no.
I over-explain.
Yes.
So I'll say no, but then I have to give a reason.
Yeah, and quite a long convoluted reason.
You don't have to tell me that. I know, but I'm just making sure.
Yeah, that's.
But then I think if I don't do that, am I still me? Because that's who I am. That and so you do think, do I become somebody completely different then? It's a tough one. You feel like you're wrestling with yourself a lot of the time.
That's really interesting point, actually, isn't it? Of, am I still me if I don't do the things I used to do, even though some of those things were not good for me?
Yeah.
And I think, that is a really good point. Yeah, but I think
it shapes who you are.
Yeah.
I'm quite empathetic, and I like people to understand where I'm coming from. So if I did say I couldn't go somewhere, I want them to know why. Not just fobbing them off. It's because of this and this.
Yeah.
They see it as over-explaining. I just see it as managing their expectations and being respectful to them because I've turned down an invitation.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, isn't it? I think it's the intent behind it. So if you're explaining yourself because you think that's courteous and good manners, then actually there isn't anything wrong with doing that. And I'd be the same, I think.
Yeah.
I'd rather say to someone, oh, I can't make that because, I've got to go to my child's open evening or whatever.
Yeah.
I'm not just fobbing you off. And I think that's nice to know.
Yeah.
But I think a lot of sort of self-help out there is like, no, you set a boundary, you just say, no, not doing that, and I don't have to explain myself.
Yeah.
And I'm not sure that's works, does it?
No, not all
if
the
that's
time.
Not who you are as a person.
No.
Yeah. So moving on to the sort of prosecution and the court case and everything, how long did that take from when you moved out to actually getting a judgment?
So he was arrested in February. The police spent 3 months maybe pulling a case together, taking statements, interviewing witnesses, they passed it to CPS in July, and it was the following April when Crown Prosecution said we can charge.
So over a year then to get to that point.
Yeah. So CPS had it for what, from the when was it? Never I said it. They had it for months. They had it for a good 7 or 8 months, poring over statements, evidence, photographs, text messages. You know, a journal I'd written. I had lots of evidence.
I was going to say, had you started keeping records,
Yes.
knowing
Yes.
what was coming? Yeah.
Yeah. I knew a storm was brewing.
Yeah.
And I knew I'd reached my limit. And I'd collated evidence years before and got rid of it all because things improved, and I didn't want to have it. I felt like it was a betrayal saving it, and I thought, you know, it's not that bad, and I shouldn't be saving this, and it, you know, it's not right, and it's okay. And I got rid of it all, and then things, of course, took a dip again, as they invariably did. So I started saving it again. So I had about 3 years worth, 4 years worth, but of course my statements went back to like 1999.
Yeah.
But you need evidence to corroborate what you're saying. So I had witnesses, and then I had my memory stick with text messages on, photographs. I had my journal that I'd written from the October to the February when we were still living together. So a first-hand account. Women's Aid advised me to write a first-hand account and said it would be really, really powerful if it went to court. So I did that. And then CPS, 4 independent prosecutors there, all decided that there was enough evidence to charge, and the police were really surprised because I don't think GMP have ever had a conviction for coercive controlling.
Right.
It's
I
really,
think I remember, and I talked to you about before, that it's actually very unheard of to actually prosecute, but when you hear the level of evidence that you've got to have to do it,
yes,
and then think of a woman in the thick of it, or a man in the thick of it, to have the wherewithal to actually start collating that evidence, it's a lot to expect from people, isn't it?
it's to stay in the mindset to continually collate it. If you can't stay in that mindset of I'm going to continue to save this because this, you know, I might leave, or I might need it, because your emotions are everywhere. But I knew that there would come a point, and I knew it related to the kids. I knew the minute they started to really see, and I told him this, said the minute the girls pick up on this or they see stuff, you know, I'm done.
Yeah.
But he massively underestimated me, and you know, the narcissist is extremely arrogant, and they always think they will come out on top.
Yeah.
And he didn't.
No.
So his arrogance was his downfall in the end.
Yeah.
And that's quite ironic.
Yeah, which is usually the case, isn't it?
Which is, the arrogance is why they behave like they behave.
Yeah.
Because it's the narcissistic trait. But
so, was it actually almost a little bit of taking some power by actually keeping those records? So even though bad things were happening, did you feel, oh, actually I'm getting some control back here because I'm keeping records of this?
Yeah, I felt like, I mean, there were many times I'd have been kicked out the bed, and I'd be downstairs on the couch, you know, really upset, thinking, oh, if the kids heard, you know, what reason am I going to have that I'm down here in the morning, and your mind's whirring, and if you were lucky, he wouldn't contact you again that night. If you weren't, there would be message after message after message whilst you were downstairs on the couch. So then I thought, right, so I screenshotted them to my camera roll and then put them on a memory stick, dated them. So when I gave the stuff to the police, it was all in chronological order, it was all dated, and it had like a crib sheet with a reference to why that situation had come about. So it was, I gave it a gift wrapped basically.
Yeah, you couldn't have done
and
more
said,
for them.
There you go.
Yeah.
There's everything. That bruise relates to this incident, and the text message for that incident is there. And knowing that I was building that up, part of me hoped I would never need it.
Yeah.
But I wanted it in case I did need it, because I always knew he would say I was lying, I was exaggerating things, blowing things out of proportion, this isn't how it is, and I knew that I needed something to say, no, look,
Yeah.
this is what is said.
Yeah. Well, that's like helping you regain your own sanity, because I guess once you start documenting it, the more you realise how it's not okay to be living like that.
Yeah. Takes a while though. It was the forum boards on Women's Aid. That was another thing I used to do. I googled it, because you're scared of googling stuff as well.
I was going to say, even would it take your phone and look what was on it?
And this sounds ridiculous. I didn't know how to clear my search history. You know, it just sounds ridiculous, I know, but I didn't. And if he'd have took my phone and looked and seen that I'd looked on, the consequence, you know, it just the thought of it would have sent me into panic mode.
Yeah.
But I did look, and the forum boards on Women's Aid, people would put their stories on, and that was like a light bulb moment. You'd go, oh my God, he's got someone like that. And the more you read, and then I would read other things, there were books online, and then you start to really realise this is so wrong that people have wrote books on it. You know, these behaviours, it's a pattern, and narcissists, abusers operate in patterns. When you spot the patterns, it's like splitting the atom.
Yeah. You're like, right.
Yeah.
I know now.
And knowledge is power.
Yeah.
And that gave me my right. I'm going to keep saving this, and I am going to keep reading these stories, because they're very, very similar.
Yeah. So did it end up going to trial and you had to give evidence?
We were scheduled for trial for March, and in the January, maybe, because he pleaded not guilty. I think it was in the January. They asked me if they could present my prosecution, so the CPS asked if they could present him with the 4 key points that they were using to prosecute, because they wanted him to go guilty, because they felt they had a really, really strong case. And my barrister was saying to his solicitor, the case is really strong. If he makes the victim, and I don't like that word, but that's what they call you.
Yeah.
If he makes the victim go to court, and the fact that children will see sight of this as well, the courts will take a very dim view on that, coupled with the evidence.
Well, it's making you have another trauma by making
Yes.
you give testimony, isn't it?
And there's a chance that there's a high chance he'll get a custodial sentence. So his solicitor advised him of that, and he then pleaded guilty. So we then went to Crown Court. I wrote a victim impact statement, what I had to write, because the judge wanted that to form part of the summing up and the sentencing. They asked me if I wanted somebody to read that out. I said no, because I thought, if I'm going to empty my head as to how this has affected me, which for me, I didn't want him to know. It was like the ultimate sacrifice, him knowing exactly how it had affected me.
Yeah, because he'd get one mass power trip off it.
Yes.
Yeah.
There'd be no empathy from him.
No.
It would just be like a sick satisfaction for me. And I really didn't want him to know. But my copper said to me, you've thrown everything at this from day one. If you don't put everything down and give it your all, the sentencing may not be, you know, what you want.
Yeah.
And my intention was never ever for him to go to prison.
No.
The children would not have benefited from that. I don't think he would have benefited. It's not what I wanted.
No.
But I wanted to make sure that it was held to account. So I did my victim impact statement. I read it out myself.
And was he there?
He was there,
for
yeah.
that? Did you do that visibly or behind the screen?
No, I did it visibly. It was
wow.
in like a plastic box in case he got sentenced. You know,
Yeah.
he had a prison,
A guard.
at the side, and you know, he was sealed in, and he was stood up, and I addressed him from like a box with a microphone, and the judge was like to the right of me, and I'd rehearsed it in the mirror because I did not want to stand with a sheet, and I wanted to address the judge in her position, and I wanted to speak coherently, and I wanted to address certain points direct to him. So I rehearsed it in the mirror. I knew what I wanted to say. It was more like a crib sheet, because it's my story. I hadn't made any of it up. I hadn't exaggerated any of it. So I knew what I needed to say. It was more about the order.
Yeah.
And I read it out and addressed some points to him.
You actually looked at him?
Yeah. And I hadn't seen him at this point for, you know, well, I hadn't spoken to him for, 18 months? I hadn't seen him for probably a year. Addressed it, the points that were particularly pertinent to me, addressed them direct to him. And then, the judge thanked me. She went out, did a thinking or whatever they do, and half an hour later came back in and, sentenced him. So, yeah.
And what was his reaction to you when you addressed those points to him?
Well, he was crying. But they cry for themselves.
Yeah, it's not crying from remorse.
They don't cry
is it?
because they're sorry.
No.
They cry for themselves, and he can turn on the tears. It should be on, should be on the Oscars. Cry for fun. To get the reaction that he needs.
Yeah.
Crying because I think he'd been called out on it, not because of what I was saying, how it had affected me. Because I say the head, when I say there, I refer to narcissists.
Yeah.
Because he is a textbook narcissist. He ticks every box.
Yeah.
They have no empathy. So he couldn't cry because I felt like this, because they don't understand what it is to feel how you feel.
No.
Because if they did, they wouldn't do it in the first place.
No. He'll still never think he's wrong, probably.
No, he doesn't.
No.
I'm the crazy woman who tried to send him to prison. That's the official
That's his
narrative.
story in his head, yeah.
Yeah.
So do they, in terms of his sentencing, I don't know, we don't have to go into the actual sentence if you don't want, but
No, I don't mind.
does he get any help, any sort of community support, therapy or rehab? I mean, I don't know what there is out there, but...
He got, what did he get now? He got a 2-year suspended sentence. So if he does anything like this again to any other women and gets, if they go to the police, that sentence will be invoked. So 2 years suspended. I think it was 200 hours of community service, a 30-day rehabilitation course on healthy relationships, and a 10-year restraining order.
Right.
For me.
Yeah.
So he can't contact me, speak to me, approach me. He's not really meant to be in like the same building. If I go into a pub, he should leave.
Yeah.
He doesn't. I can't make him as such, but he should. If anything was to happen,
yeah,
and he'd been found to be in that building with this restraining order, then the suspended sentence would be invoked.
Right.
And he can't cross the boundary line of my drive.
Right. That's some solace, I guess. So, do you know if he's still in the area, or?
Yeah,
He's not moved.
Yeah, still sees the kids sporadically.
Yeah.
So yeah, he's still local. I don't see him really. I don't bump into him, which is surprising because we live in quite a small town.
Yeah.
But I don't bump into him. But my barrister said that the sentence that they'd given him was the maximum that was allowed.
Right.
So she said she's gone to town on him.
Yeah.
She said that's the maximum penalty that they can give without a custodial sentence. So she's thrown as much at him as she can.
Yeah.
Which I thought spoke volumes.
Yeah,
really.
you definitely probably wanted to make an example, but obviously due to your diligence in actually having all that evidence.
Yeah, that's what got it over the line with the Crown Prosecution Service.
Yeah.
Which, I was really proud of myself.
Yeah, you should be, because I
was.
think there must be so many other cases that are probably as serious but don't get prosecuted because people haven't got that strength to have the evidence. And
It's having the support, it's having the network, and it's having something that is not just your marriage. So they try to isolate you, you know, from friends and family. Never stopped me working, but you know, we needed the money.
yeah,
You know, so I, you know, it encouraged me in one hand, but then take it away in another. So it was very like offset. So any success I had was always offset. But yeah, I never not had to work, but they do try and isolate. So I had my job, I had my friends, although some of them were put to one side. Looking back on it now, they were extracted for in various ways, and I lost touch with them. But I always had something to prop me up. A lot of people don't have that. They don't work. They don't have their own money. They don't have any support.
That's a big problem, isn't it? Not having your own bank account and money.
Well, I
that's
didn't.
the biggest barrier, isn't it?
It was a joint account.
Yeah.
And what I spent would be controlled, but I did earn the money.
Yeah.
He earned the money and I earned the money. Whereas, you know, some women, some men, they're at home with young children. They don't work, and they literally have no way out. You know, you can see how you would just bounce like a pinball.
Yeah.
And so you can see why people don't leave.
Yeah.
And why they can't prosecute.
Yeah. Well, it's almost impossible, isn't it? If you haven't got your own money, you're literally walking away with perhaps a suitcase in your hand, with nowhere to go.
Yeah.
And no support.
Yeah.
It's not surprising that they end up going back. Did you say 7 times was the number? Yeah.
To leave.
Unbelievable. Well, the next question I normally ask is have you become braver as you've got older? But to me, it sounds like you've actually been incredibly brave all your life, and that's only got more since you actually made the decision to leave.
I think you get less tolerant as you get older, and you get more resilient. So I was tolerant of behaviours when I was younger, but the children were younger. But then as you get older, your children get older, they experience different things, they start becoming young women, and then you become less tolerant of certain behaviours.
Yeah.
And as you build up that tolerance, your resilience builds then as well.
Yeah.
So I think the two come hand in hand. You know, if that equates to being brave, then yeah, maybe.
Yeah, I think a common theme on the podcast so far has been that people didn't think they were brave, but then when they've actually looked back in the context of the questions, they've probably gone, oh, actually that was brave, but I didn't think I was being brave in the moment. It was, as you said, it had to be done. There was no other choice.
Yeah, that was it. It was the only option. I exhausted all other routes to get where I needed to be. That was the only option.
Yeah.
And he put me in that corner. I didn't go there myself. I was pushed and coerced into that corner. That was the only route.
Yeah.
So you have to dig deep and find the way to do it.
Yeah.
Otherwise you can't get out.
Exactly, yeah. So generally now though, as a person who is free, have you done any things that you think, oh well, because I'm free and I'm feeling more brave, I've done some different things in life, or are you just experiencing the joy of being free?
I tend to try not turn things down much. So I'm a big believer in, I spent so long having to say, no, I can't do that, and making up excuses, or doing things, because I was allowed to do things, but there would always be a consequence. So really you're doing them, but you're not really doing them.
Yeah.
Because you're always in like a bit of a limbo.
Yeah.
So now I think if someone says, oh, do you want to do this? You know, whether that be networking with work, coming to a dinner, or friends go, oh, do you want to book this? I kind of go, yeah, because I think, well, I should.
And I'm free
and I'm
to
free
make
to
that
do
choice
it.
now.
I can make that decision.
Yeah.
I know how much money I've got in the bank. You know, I can control my life, and I will do, and I'll take every opportunity that comes my way. I think that makes me a bit irresponsible at times, because life isn't like that, is it?
No.
You can't just do whatever you want whenever you want,
Yeah.
and you know, go out every weekend, or you know, holidays or whatever. Life isn't like that. But I'm still experiencing this new, I can do what I want when I want.
Yeah, well, I think actually you're owed a lot of that irresponsibility because you've missed out on that. So, because if you were saying 20 years, so you were 25 when you met, so
21.
21, right? So, yeah, you've kind of missed out on that thing you have when you're young of being irresponsible, haven't you? Because you're already being controlled. So I think you've earned some credit
Yeah.
in the irresponsibility front.
Yeah.
Definitely.
Yeah.